Welcome to History in the Shadow. This is the story of Eddie Slovik, the only American soldier executed for desertion in World War II. World War II. Over 50,000 American soldiers deserted. 21,000 were put on trial. All 21,000 were found guilty. But only one was executed. Only one. His name was Eddie Slovik. Eddie Slovik was 24 years old. Short. About 130 pounds. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked scared. Because he was. Eddie grew up in Detroit during the Great Depression. Extreme poverty. No opportunities. As a teenager, he made mistakes. Petty theft. Reform school. Jail time. A criminal record that would follow him forever. Even after he got out, life was hard. He lived on the edge of society. No good jobs. No respect. Just survival. Then in 1944, Eddie received his draft notice. He was terrified. He had just gotten married. He had a young wife, Antoinette. Now he had to go to war. At basic training, Eddie struggled. He couldn't keep up. The drill sergeant yelled at him constantly. He wasn't strong. He wasn't brave. He was just a scared kid who didn't belong there. But the army sent him to Europe anyway. 1944. Eddie arrived in France. The war was brutal.
Destroyer village.
Dead bodies everywhere. The sound of gunfire. Explosions. Eddie saw combat for the first time and he froze.
Pure terror.
His hands shook. He couldn't move forward. Other soldiers were fighting. Eddie was breaking down. During the chaos of battle, Eddie got separated from his unit. He wandered through the woods for days. Lost. Starving. Trying to survive. Eventually, he found his way back to American lines. But his commanders ordered him to return to combat. Eddie knew he couldn't do it. So he made a decision. A calculated decision. Eddie sat down and wrote a statement. In clear handwriting, he confessed. I, Private Eddie D. Slovik, confess to desertion of the United States Army. I refused to go into combat. He signed it. He dated it. Then he handed it to his officers. The officers were shocked. Do you understand what this means? They asked. Eddie nodded. Yes. He understood. Eddie even said something prophetic. Thousands have deserted. Only one is needed to set an example. And that one is me. Because I am the easiest. He knew exactly what would happen. Eddie was court-martialed. The verdict. Guilty of desertion. The sentence. Death by firing squad. But Eddie didn't believe they would actually execute him. He thought it was just a threat. To scare him. He was wrong. Eddie appealed. Denied. He appealed to the division commander. Denied. He appealed all the way to General Eisenhower. Denied. The execution order was approved. Why was Eddie chosen? Out of 21,000 guilty deserters, why him? Because Eddie was expendable. He had a criminal record. No family connections. No military heritage. He was poor. Working class. The easiest target. Eddie wasn't the worst offender. He was just the most vulnerable. His past mattered more than his present. On January 31st, 1945, Eddie woke up in his prison cell. It was execution day. A chaplain came. Eddie couldn't eat. His hands were shaking. They drove him to the execution site in France. A cold field. A wooden post. 11 American soldiers with rifles. Eddie's legs could barely hold him up. They tied him to the post. Ropes around his chest. The chaplain read last rites. Eddie whispered prayers. He looked at the 11 soldiers. They were crying. They didn't want to do this. But they had orders. A blindfold was placed over Eddie's eyes. These were his final seconds. He was 24 years old. The officer gave the command. 11 rifles fired. Eddie's body jerked. But he didn't die. The first volley failed. He was still alive. Groaning. Still conscious. The soldiers had to reload. Faces full of horror. But before they could fire again, Eddie died from his wounds. Total time, 15 minutes. January 31st, 1945.
10:04 a.m.
Eddie Slovik was pronounced dead. They buried him in Plot E, the dishonored section of the military cemetery. No honors. No ceremony. Just a grave among criminals. Here's the injustice. 50,000 American soldiers deserted. 21,000 were convicted. But only Eddie Slovik was executed. The others, they served prison time. Or got discharges. They went home after the war. They lived long lives. But Eddie died. Why? Because he had a criminal past. Because he had no connections. Because he was poor. Because he was easy. Eddie's prophecy came true. Only one is needed. And that one is me. Because I am the easiest. He was right. Wars don't just judge actions. They judge entire lives. And Eddie's life had marked him as expendable. One man, out of 50,000, executed, not for being the worst, but for being the weakest. That's Eddie Slovik's story, the only American soldier executed for desertion in World War II.